I monitor a room that no one is allowed to enter. It's room 8. It's always been room 8. I sit in the observation annex, a cramped, windowless space adjacent to the main corridor of Sector C. My workstation is a desk bolted to the floor, a chair with worn armrests, and a single monitor displaying a live feed from the camera mounted high in the corner of room 8. The image is in grayscale, high resolution, devoid of sound. The room itself is unremarkable. Pale green walls, a narrow cot with a thin mattress, a stainless steel sink, a recessed toilet, a small table bolted to the floor, and a single overhead light that never dims. There is no window, no decorations, no personal effects, nothing to indicate it has ever been occupied, or ever will be. My job is simple. Watch, log, report anomalies. I've held this position for 3 years, 11 months, and, today, 4 days. The contract is renewable annually, contingent on performance and discretion. Discretion is non-negotiable. We are not custodians of a space. We are custodians of a boundary. The room must remain empty. The door must remain closed. And no one, not even me, is permitted to enter. The institution that employs me is officially called the Helios Behavioral Stabilization and Containment Facility. Colloquially, it's just Helios. It's not a prison, though it shares some structural similarities. It's not a hospital, though it employs psychiatrists and nurses. Helios exists in a bureaucratic liminal space, funded by a federal grant, overseen by a review board whose members change with unsettling frequency, and governed by a thick binder of protocols that read like sacred texts. The rules aren't suggestions. They are architecture. They are the walls, the locks, the very air we breathe. My supervisor, Dr. Aris Thorne, once told me, "Rules are the scaffolding of sanity, Eli. Without them, everything collapses into noise." He said it with the calm certainty of a man who has seen what happens when the scaffolding fails. I believed him then. I believe him more now. When I started, the rules were straightforward. Rule 1. The door to room 8 must remain sealed at all times. This is enforced by a magnetic lock system tied to the central security grid. The lock disengages only during scheduled maintenance checks, conducted by Level 4 personnel in full biocontainment suits, and re-engages automatically within 30 seconds. No exceptions. Rule 2. Observation must be continuous. The camera feed cannot be interrupted. If the system fails, I am to initiate Protocol Echo immediately, seal the corridor, alert security, and wait for a technician. Under no circumstances am I to approach the door. Rule 3. No physical contact with the door or its frame. This was added after my predecessor, a man named Renner, was found unconscious in the corridor outside room 8. He'd touched the handle. Security footage showed him standing there for 23 minutes, just staring, before he collapsed. He was transferred to another facility. They never told us where. For the first year, nothing happened. Room 8 remained empty. The cot stayed neatly made. The sink dripped once at 3:17 a.m. every third Tuesday. A quirk of the plumbing that maintenance logged but never fixed, because it's within tolerance. I watched. I logged. I reported no anomalies. The quiet was almost meditative. Then, in my 14th month, the first new rule arrived. It was delivered not by email, not in person, but printed on thermal paper. A slip that slid silently from a slot beneath my monitor at precisely 0600 hours. The text was centered, all caps, no signature. New protocol. Under no circumstances may personnel attempt to communicate with room 8. I read it 3 times. Communication with an empty room? It made no sense, but rules at Helios aren't debated. They're absorbed. I filed the slip in the red binder labelled Addenda and continued my watch. The unease didn't come from the rule itself, but from the implication. That communication was now a possibility worth forbidding. A week later, during my night shift, I saw it. It was 2:48 a.m. The feed showed the usual emptiness, dim light, sterile surfaces. Then, on the edge of the cot, near the footboard, something shifted. Just a ripple in the fabric of the thin blanket, like a hand had pressed down and been withdrawn. I leaned closer. The image was sharp. There was no one there, but the indentation remained for 17 seconds before smoothing out. I logged it. Anomaly 14-7. Transient deformation of bedding. Cot. Duration, 17 seconds. Cause unknown. I didn't mention the word hand. That would be interpretation. My job is observation, not imagination. Dr. Thorne reviewed the log the next day. He stood behind my chair, hands clasped behind his back, his breath smelling faintly of mint and stale coffee. "You did well, Eli," he said. "Stick to the facts. The room is empty. Remember that." But the room didn't feel empty anymore. The next rule arrived 2 months later. New protocol. All personnel assigned to observation duties must undergo bi-weekly psych evaluations. Failure to attend constitutes breach of contract. The evaluations were conducted by Dr. Lien, a woman with calm eyes and a voice like smoothed stone. She never asked about room 8 directly. Instead, she asked about sleep patterns, appetite, recurring thoughts. "Do you ever feel watched, Eli?" she asked once. "Only by the camera in room 8, I said. She smiled thinly. "The camera doesn't watch. It records." "Semantics," I replied. She didn't smile again that session. Around this time, maintenance started appearing more often. They'd come in pairs, clad in grey coveralls, never speaking above a whisper. They'd check the door seals, scan the walls with handheld devices that emitted soft clicks, and leave without acknowledging me. Once I saw one of them press his palm flat against the wall beside the door, just for a second, before his partner hissed something and pulled him away. I logged it. Maintenance personnel deviated from standard procedure. Physical contact with wall adjacent to room 8 observed. The log was acknowledged with a single word. Noted. Then came the whispers. Not audible whispers. There's no audio feed from room 8, and the walls are sound dampened, but visual whispers. Flickers at the edge of the frame. A shadow that wasn't cast by any object. A distortion in the air above the sink, like heat haze, though the room is climate-controlled to a constant 21 degrees Celsius. I started double-checking the camera feed against the backup system. Both showed the same anomalies. I began having dreams about the room. In them, I'm standing inside it, but it's not empty. There's a figure in the corner facing the wall. I try to speak, but my voice is gone. The figure turns, slowly, and I wake up just before I see its face. I didn't tell Dr. Lien about the dreams. The third new rule arrived on a Tuesday. Rain tapped against the roof of the annex, a rare sound since the building is mostly subterranean. New protocol. Observation personnel are forbidden from researching the history of Room 8 or Sector C. All previous records are classified. This one stung. Not because I'd been researching, the thought had never occurred to me, but because it confirmed that there was a history. That room 8 wasn't just a room. It was a repository, a vault, a secret. I asked Dr. Thorne about it during our weekly check-in. "Why is there a rule against researching something that doesn't exist?" I said. He didn't look up from his tablet. "Because curiosity is the first crack in the dam, Eli. And once the water starts flowing, you can't predict where it will go. Only that it will drown you." I didn't ask again. The anomalies grew bolder. A water glass appeared on the table. Not placed, appeared. One frame it wasn't there, the next it was. Half full. Clear liquid. I watched it for hours. It never evaporated, never spilled, never moved. I logged it as object manifestation, glass vessel, liquid contents. The response from Central was immediate. Acknowledge, do not interact, continue observation. Then, the cot. It started folding itself. Not all at once, but in stages. First, the blanket would tuck itself in at the corners. Then, the pillow would smooth itself. Finally, the sheet would pull taut, as if an invisible body were lying down and then vanishing. It happened every night at 11:03 p.m., like clockwork. I stopped sleeping. I'd sit in my apartment, curtains drawn, replaying the feed on my personal tablet, though I wasn't supposed to have a copy. The footage was clean, compressed, but the details were there. The precision of the movements, the economy of the gestures, whoever or whatever was in there knew how to make a bed. I began to wonder if empty was the wrong word. Maybe the room wasn't empty. Maybe it was occupied by absence. The fourth rule came during a power fluctuation. The lights in the annex dimmed for 3 seconds. When they came back, the thermal slip was waiting. New protocol. Observation personnel must wear the issued monitoring bracelet at all times during shift. Removal will trigger automatic lockdown. The bracelet was a thin band of black polymer, cool to the touch. It fit snugly around my left wrist. It didn't do anything I could detect. No lights, no sounds, but I felt it. A constant silent pressure. A reminder. Dr. Liane asked about it during my next evaluation. "How does it make you feel?" she said. "Like I'm being watched," I said. "Good," she replied. "That means it's working." I didn't understand what she meant until later. One night during a routine systems check, I noticed something in the camera's metadata. The feed wasn't just recording room 8, it was recording me-chi. The annex had its own camera, mounted above the door, feeding directly to Central. They weren't just watching the room, they were watching me watch the room. The bracelet wasn't a tracker, it was a tether. A way to ensure I stayed compliant, even when I thought I was alone. I felt a cold dread settle in my chest. Not fear of room 8, but fear of the system that surrounded it. The quiet authority that masked itself as care. The rules that kept multiplying, not to protect us from the room, but to protect the room from us. Who was really contained here? The fifth rule arrived on my 3rd anniversary. New protocol. All personnel are to refer to room 8 as the patient in verbal and written communication. Failure to comply will result in immediate reassignment. Room 8 was now a person. I sat with that for a long time. The implications were staggering. If room 8 was a patient, then what was its condition? What was its treatment? And who was its doctor? I started listening to the silence between the rules. Dr. Thorne called me into his office that afternoon. His office was sparse. Desk, chair, filing cabinet, no photos. He offered me tea. I declined. "You're doing excellent work, Eli," he said. "Consistent, precise, unemotional. That's what we need." "Why is it a patient?" I asked. He set his cup down. "Because everything that requires monitoring is, by definition, under care. Even if the care is merely observation. Even if the patient cannot, or will not, acknowledge the caregiver. Is it dangerous?" He smiled. "Not if the rules are followed." I left with more questions than answers. The final escalation began subtly. The glass on the table started moving, not sliding, rotating, slowly, clockwise, at a rate of 1 full turn every 24 hours. I timed it. It was exact. Then, the sink faucet dripped out of schedule, not randomly, but in patterns. Long drip, long, short. Like Morse code. I looked it up later. It spelled HELLO. I didn't log it, I couldn't. Because if I logged it, I'd have to acknowledge that something in room 8 was trying to communicate, and communication was forbidden. But more than that, I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing I'd noticed. Who were they? I didn't know. But I felt them. In the rules, in the bracelet, in the camera above my door. One night, I saw the figure. It was standing by the sink, facing the wall. Tall, indistinct, wearing what looked like a hospital gown. Its hands were pressed flat against the tiles. It didn't move for 47 minutes. Then, it turned its head, just slightly, toward the camera. I couldn't see its face. The angle was wrong. But I felt its gaze. I didn't breathe until it vanished. The next day, I requested a transfer. Dr. Thorne denied it. You're too valuable, Eli, and too close. Close to what? To understanding. I didn't ask what that meant. The sixth and final rule came 3 weeks later. It was the longest one yet. New protocol. Observation. Personnel may be required to enter room 8 under direct supervisory orders. Such orders will only be issued in extreme circumstances. Compliance is mandatory. Refusal constitutes grounds for termination and legal action. I read it over and over. My hands shook. They were preparing me, conditioning me, making the unthinkable feel inevitable. I went to Dr. Lean that afternoon. I can't do it, I said. She didn't ask what it was. She already knew. Why not? Because the first rule says no one is allowed to enter. The rules change, Eli, that's the point. What's in there? She leaned forward. What do you think is in there? I don't know. Good, keep it that way. Certainty is the enemy of control. I left her office feeling hollow. The next night, the figure was on the cot, sitting, head bowed, hands clasped in its lap. It stayed like that for 3 hours. Then, it raised its head and looked directly into the camera. Still no face, just a suggestion of features in the grayscale haze. But I felt it. A presence, an intelligence, and something else, loneliness. It was so profound, so aching that I had to look away. I understood then. Room 8 wasn't a prison. It was a quarantine. Not for a disease, but for a truth. A truth so dangerous that even knowing it existed required layers of rules, layers of personnel, layers of silence. And I was the outermost layer. The next morning, Dr. Thorne called me in. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. It's time, he said. For what? For you to meet the patient. My blood went cold. I'm not ready. You don't have to be ready. You just have to follow orders. What if I refuse? He looked at me with something that almost resembled pity. Then they'll send someone else, and you'll never know what's in there. But you'll spend the rest of your life wondering. And that, he said softly, is a kind of containment too. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the annex watching the feed. The figure was gone. The room was empty again. But I knew it was waiting. At 0600 hours, security arrived. 2 guards in black uniforms. No names on their badges. Procedure Delta, one of them said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. They led me to the door of room 8. Dr. Thorne was there holding a tablet. Dr. Lean stood a few feet behind him, arms crossed. The bracelet will deactivate the lock, Thorne said. When you enter, the door will seal behind you. You will have 10 minutes. Do not touch anything. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make sudden movements. And whatever you do, do not show fear. Why? Because it feeds on it. I stared at him. Feeds? He didn't elaborate. 10 minutes, Eli. Then the door reopens. Walk out. Don't look back. The guard placed a hand on my shoulder. Place your wrist against the scanner. I did. The lock clicked. The door hissed open. The air that rushed out was cool and still, carrying a scent I couldn't place, clean, metallic, with an undertone of something organic, like old paper or dry leaves. I stepped inside. The door sealed behind me with a final soft thud. Room 8 was exactly as it appeared on the monitor. Pale green walls, cot, sink, table. The glass of water sat exactly where I'd seen it. Half full. But it wasn't empty. It stood in the center of the room, facing me. Tall, thin, dressed in a simple grey gown. Its face was indistinct, not blurred, but absent. Not featureless, but unformed, like a face that hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. It didn't move. It just was. I remembered Thorne's words. Do not show fear. So I didn't. I stood as still as the cot, as silent as the walls. It tilted its head as if listening. Then it spoke, not with a voice, not with sound, but inside my head, clear, calm, familiar. You've been watching me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was locked. It's all right, it said. I've been watching you too. Images flooded my mind, not memories. Moments. Me at my desk. Me drinking coffee at 3 a.m. Me staring at the feed, eyes tired, mind racing. Me dreaming of the figure in the corner. It knew me. They told you I was dangerous, it said. But I'm not. I'm just contained. Why? I managed to whisper. Because I know too much. About what? About what's outside. I didn't understand. You think this room is a prison, it said. But it's a sanctuary. Out there. It gestured vaguely toward the door, toward the world beyond Helios. They're the ones who are trapped. They don't see the walls. They don't feel the rules tightening around them. But I do. And I remember what it was like before. Before what? Before they decided that some truths were too heavy to carry. So they built places like this, to hold the weight, to keep the rest of you light. I thought of the rules, the escalating protocols, the quiet authority that masked itself as care. You're not a patient, I said. No, it replied. I'm the truth they couldn't bury, so they locked it in a room and called it containment. The bracelet on my wrist vibrated. 5 minutes left. They'll ask you what I said. It continued. Don't tell them, because if they know I've spoken to you, they'll reset you. They'll wipe your memory and assign someone new, and I'll be alone again. Why tell me now? Because you're the first one who didn't look away. I didn't know what to say. Go, it said. And remember, the door isn't to keep me in, it's to keep you out. The bracelet vibrated again. 2 minutes. I turned and walked to the door. It opened before I touched it. Dr. Thorne was waiting. His eyes were sharp, probing. Well? I looked at him, at Dr. Leon, at the guards. I saw nothing, I said. The room was empty. Thorne studied me for a long moment, then he nodded. Good. They led me back to the annex. I sat at my desk. The feed was live, room 8 was empty, the cot was made, the glass of water sat on the table. But I knew better. I monitored a room that no one is allowed to enter. But now I understand why. It's not because of what's inside. It's because of what's outside. The truth isn't dangerous because it's monstrous. It's dangerous because it's ordinary, because it's the air we breathe, the ground we walk on, the silence between the rules. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So they build rooms, they write rules, and they assign watchers, all to keep the truth contained. And me? I'm still watching. But now, when I look at the empty room, I don't see absence. I see the shape of everything they're afraid to name. And I keep watching. Because someone has to. And because in the quiet I swear I can still hear it breathing.